thank you for that introduction. And thank you for a reminder on farming and how the land produces. And God gives us the harvest and the bounty and the ability to get wealth. And of course, there's a difference between fiat currency and what land produces, which is real wealth. And so it's interesting that we stay on top of it, because today is an interesting day in the whole year. It's the last great day. You can see in Mark 7:35 that Yahushua is mentioning it, right? This is the last and great day of the feast, because sometimes we could review the ingathering or the Feast of Tabernacles actually is 8 days. And you have the same with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which, although it's specifically 7 days, you can't eat unleavened bread. It's an 8-day feast, because unless you have the 14th day and the sacrifice taking place, there is no Passover in any event. So you have a spring and a fall 8-day period of the feast. Well, yesterday we concluded the 7-day period of the Feast of Tabernacles or Booths, termed ingathering as well, because it was a time of the fall harvest, at least in the Middle East. Of course, when you go around the world, things can change radically every 300 and 400 miles, north or south. Things can change dramatically for your sowing and reaping, etc. So most of us have come together in a fashion being like-minded over this issue of the calendar, because here we're keeping this last great day attached to the Feast of Tabernacles, which represents the millennial kingdom of God. It represents a new heavens and a new earth that's forthcoming. But if we're not on the right day and keeping it in the right way, is it acceptable for God? So we can be attending a feast somewhere and keeping a last and great day of the feast. And what if you're a month out of sync on the start of the year? Or what if you're a day late? So if you're a day late on Passover, you know what the effect of that is. If you're a day late on Atonement, there's even a more radical effect on missing it. And so the calendar is a very important item in your worship, and probably most of us was one of the last things we studied, because it can be a bit heavy to get the old thoughts we had out of our mind and think more in terms of the way God does, using the moon and the lunar cycle to govern the calendar and set the holy days for the year. Because each sequence of these 3 feasts is set by the new moon of the first month. That establishes it. Rabbinical Judaism then, of course, postpones it, because they claimed it was inconvenient to have 2 holy days that were back-to-back. So a lot of Rabbinical Judaism and idolatrous, for the most part, or non-idolatrous churches of God, keeping the feast on a separate day, because it's been postponed, that it's a matter of convenience. So a lot of this is tied up, though, to the difference between starting the months on a conjunction, which no one can see because of the alignment, or a crescent. And historically, from Babylon, it's part of the Crescent Moon observations and or worship are related to the Babylonian mystery religion. That's where it came from. So anybody can claim anything they want, but it'll all go back to Babylon and to the mystery religions. And so it should. It's quite mysterious. And what happened over time anciently, of course, when the oral law was being brought into Israel, or Judea at least, and they began acknowledging the crescent moon and sending out witnesses and things to it, it proved, of course, difficult to assign a day. Now, everybody agrees that anciently the new moon was a holy day and kept as such. Everybody agrees that it will be kept as a holy day in the millennium and on into the new heavens, new earth. It just happens to be that at this time, you don't have to, somehow. Now, when a bit of this paper was first presented to, I formerly associated with the Worldwide Church of God, and I had done up a short paper on the moon's issue, and discussed with the ministers there over the Crescent Moon and the postponements. And they, after about 3 months of this document that I gave them, I got it handed back to me by the minister responsible for me. He said, well, yes, you're probably right. Anciently, it was kept as a holy day. In the future, it will be. However, it's a church decision, that we don't have to keep it now. It is too much of the burden on the brethren. It's just not possible. He said, you can keep it if you want to, but don't tell anybody. So this is a cut-down version of this original document that was sort of 20 to 30 pages, because really 10 pages covers the highlights and the points that need to be made, and anybody that's interested in the detail can look it up for themselves. So this is a short paper called The Sin of Crescent Moon Observation, and it's my observations and opinion on what I would term false worship that I object to, because it has the effect of damaging other people's faith and causing huge millions of people to keep feast days at their convenience and not on the days God assigned. So if God assigned certain days and he says you're to rejoice and enjoy them, it's in our interest of all of planet Earth to keep them without whining and complaining like a bunch of little spoiled brats. Because that's the most thing is all we hear out of these churches of God and covenant-keeping bodies. So, the sin of Crescent Moon observation. The modern Islamic and formerly ancient Jewish community have attempted to estimate the time when a first crescent moon can be seen. They had ancient lists of approved witnesses. It proved difficult to predict the day in question and made publishing a lunar calendar impossible. Even with modern equipment and available quick computations, estimating the time when a first crescent moon can be seen has proved to be impossible. The conjunction cannot be seen. However, by determining the angular separation of the sun and moon, you multiply the degrees times 2, anyone can easily determine the time and day of the next conjunction. You can see how to determine the day of the next conjunction easily if you'd like to follow up on that statement. Now, all of humanity must worship the one true God, our Father Elohim, named Jehovah, on the days that are set apart by the natural astronomical cycle. We have to follow the natural astronomical cycle. That's what we're to observe. God, the Almighty, knows what he's doing. It's only us that are the problem. Just follow the natural astronomical cycle. The 24-hour day, or one solar rotational day, is from dark to the end of evening nautical twilight to dark in our local time. You see the paper at the start of the day. Now, you can see that in Genesis 1, verse 5. God called the light day, darkness he called night. There was evening and morning the first day. So no, the days do not begin at sunrise. These are from the Septuagint. Psalm 104:20. You make darkness, and it was night. In it all the wild beasts of the forest will be abroad. Now, the new moons occur at the conjunction of the sun, moon, and earth. These days are Sabbaths, holy days, and the first day of the first month establishes or sets the 3 annual feasts with the attendant sanctified or holy days as annually set apart or made holy for worship. So the first day of the first month establishes all the holy days for the upcoming year, right from the start. So you should know when that day is and observe it. It's important. Now, the year begins in the northern hemisphere spring. Exodus 12:2, this month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year for you. And you'll see in that whole section of 11 and 12, chapters 11 and 12, that it's talking about Passover. So the Passover is related to the first month of the year. It takes place on the 15th day of the first month. But, so it doesn't start in the 7th month in the fall which is the Babylonian start of their year, as numbers of people do. It doesn't start on January 1st, which came about from the winter solstice on December 25th, when all of these pagan saviors were purported to be born. And we need to know the calendar issues so that you can be able to defend your faith and be able to understand, the individuals that are attended with Worldwide were taken over by Trinitarians, and Mr. Joseph Tkach in the end disbanded the Sabbath and told perhaps 110 or 20,000 people that they didn't have to keep the Sabbath anymore. And then over time, of course, they began keeping the pagan holidays. So it wasn't a problem keeping holidays. It was just a problem keeping God's holy days. That was the problem. And we have to be very careful. We can find ourselves executed, and not in a very good manner. So keep it in mind. It's worth your time to study this. It is not that complicated. Now, with the massive divergent opinions, you can get confused. So I think it's impossible not to. But over some time, if you spend some time thinking about it, you will find that you're able to discern this issue on the calendar of what is or isn't correct, and learn to think the way the mind of God works. And I think you will conclude that you have to start the month on a known day. You can't start on an unknown, hope for the best day. And even if you did estimate of when it was, if it's overcast, you wouldn't confirm it anyway, which happens every few years in the Middle East. In Jerusalem, when they're assigning the start of the month with the Crescent Moon, every few years they get 2 or 3 days of overcast, and they don't know. So just keep some of this in mind. Now, on the first day of the first month is established or set apart from the conjunction during Jerusalem's time. As we all know, we live on this round planet, and as it rotates around, from a starting point, you will end up with things happening in 2 different days on planet Earth. So at the time of the conjunction, you will be out of sync on part of planet Earth with that day. So you see the Sabbath, as the world rotates around, is on a different hourly sequence from what might be happening in Jerusalem. It has to be, because you're on around Earth and it rotates. It's moving without our permission. So this can cause some problem in some people's mind, because they will declare that whenever the conjunction or whenever the crescent is, well, that makes it holy wherever I am on planet Earth. Well, no, you don't make anything holy. Holy means to set apart for a specific purpose. Now, the Almighty will tell you when that is and set it apart so it's clear for you. Where you are is irrelevant, except you have to apply this legislation from your Almighty wherever you are on planet Earth. Well, I hope that's not confusing. Now, Isaiah 2:3, many people will come and say, "Let us go up to the mountain of Jehovah, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths, for the law will go forth from Zion, the word of Jehovah from Jerusalem." So you're starting your year, and you're starting your timing from the conjunction as it takes place in Jerusalem's time zone. That sets the day apart, and when that day arrives for you in different parts of the world, that's when you keep it. So the day of the conjunction doesn't mean wherever you are becomes holy time. You then have 2 starts of the year. Now, it all starts from Jerusalem and rotates around a 24-hour solar rotation. I don't know how complicated that can get. It's pretty simple. So the month is the first month, which has the 15th day, which follows the vernal equinox. This day is the Passover, and sometimes is categorized as a full moon, which it may not be a full moon. Now, crescent observation, historically, the modern Islamic national communities have now recently added the crescent moon image, or icon, to many of their flags of their modern nations. This began with the Turks in the 1500s, but previously had not been permitted in Islam, being considered idolatrous. Formerly, all of the flags of the nations in Islam, specifically amongst the Arabs, then of course they had 12 tribes. 12 tribes of Ishmael, identical to the 12 tribes of Israel. But then when this spread out through the world, and here you have Esau, starting to use it and adopting Islam, modifications were added into it, so they started adding a crescent moon to it. Imagine. So the modern Muslims and Jews have attempted to estimate the time of the visual arrival of the first crescent moon. Now, recently, they have enlisted the assistance of several prominent Western agencies, as this had proved to be difficult. That was their wording, difficult. Now, our Father did not give us a method like crescent moon observation, which cannot be used to determine the first day of the first month. This is the critically important day that establishes the three feasts and all of their moed, their holy days. The conjunction is easily determined and can be projected and printed out years in advance with mathematics. And the people that are surrounding Mount Gerizim, the Samaritans, publish this document with the conjunction twice a year and have for 2,500 years. Yes, they had very good mathematics and very good mathematicians in the olden days, so it's us that are in default or deficient. So this was well known, and was no mystery to it. It was known in Israel as well. Now, as we show in part 2, it can even be determined with a tape measure by using your fingers. Following the natural astronomical cycle is as simple as understanding of who we are to worship, although that can be a bit confusing to many people as well. Now, from the comments below, which are published by these enlisted agencies, we can see that a guaranteed time of viewing with the crescent moon is now and always has been impossible. So I'm going to use a few quotes here just so it can't be contested that it's just my opinion. U.S. Naval Observatory, and you'll see that it's the navies of all the nations around the world that have to know when the new and the full moons are. Otherwise, they miss the tide. And they'll find themselves beached and can't get in or out, and they'll be laying in their boats over on their side because the moon governs the tides everywhere on the planet Earth. This was standard knowledge. Like little children could tell you when the next new and full moons were that lived near the oceans because he governed the tides. It was just standard knowledge. Anyway, U.S. Naval Observatory quote here, under optimal conditions, the crescent moon can be sighted somewhat less than 15 hours after the astronomical new moon. Usually, however, it is not seen until it is more than 24 hours old. Often it is not seen for more than 48 hours. So now we've gone from 15 hours to 24 to 48. Now, despite these advances, we still cannot predict the exact time or geographical location at which a young crescent moon will first be spotted. I find that very helpful. The Royal Greenwich Observatory. So Greenwich is a place where the time was modified and changed in recent history, late 1700s, early 1800s in Great Britain. That was the site of the Greenwich and the latitude and longitude assaults on humanity as to where they're causing things to take place. But anyway, we've been conned and adopt these words. So at the Royal Greenwich Observatory, quote, it is not possible to predict accurately the dates on which the new crescent moon will first be seen each month, since there is no collection of reliable, fully documented observations that can be used to establish the conditions that normally be satisfied at the time of first visibility. The simplest basis for prediction is that the moon should be more than a certain age, measured from the time of the astronomical new moon, at the time of sunset at the place concerned. It is better to use the true elongation, the angular separation of the moon from the sun at this time, rather than the age. The new crescent is not normally visible until the sun is below the horizon, so it is desirable to take into account the altitude of the moon during twilight. The chances of seeing the new crescent depend slightly on the distance of the moon from the earth, being greatest when the moon is closest. The local conditions, especially at the height of the observer above sea level, and the character of the surrounding surfaces are important. Even when the sky is free from cloud, there can be considerable variations in the clarity of the atmosphere from day to day. The visual acuity of the observer is also significant. Yes, so if your eyes aren't very good, you wouldn't be a very good witness, would you? Now, it must be realized, too, that there are considerable variations in the astronomical conditions with both latitude and longitude on the Earth, so that even if the weather conditions were good everywhere, the dates of the first sightings would differ from place to place. I hope you catch that. You can have the best weather on planet Earth for 3 days in a row on the 29th and 30th day, and the sightings can differ the further north and further south you go. Predictions can therefore only be valid for restricted areas, so certain places on the Earth. Unless under ordinary conditions, the first sighting will not occur until the age of the moon exceeds about 30 hours, but a few reliable reports are known of sightings under very good conditions when the age has been only 20 hours or even less. It is unlikely that the new crescent will be visible unless the elongation exceeds 10 degrees and the moon exceeds 5 degrees when the sun is in 3. So that's all talking about angular separation. If you saw that on a picture, you would understand it completely what's being spoken about there. So it's just the angles of the sun and the moon in relation to each other. It's interesting to note that the new crescent moon can always be seen 30 days after the previous one, and in half the cases it can be seen after 29 days because the length of the synodic month is 29.53 days, which means the month overlaps with the sabbatical months, or sabbatical days of the week, and is constantly losing time over a 12-month period. Which is why Islam then adopted a calendar that doesn't move, and then their fast, they changed from the 10th day of the 7th month for 24 hours a day, they changed it to every day of the whole 7th month for the daylight periods, which is what was being done with the fellow bragging to Messiah, and that was what was done with fasts in Babylon. That's when your fasts were in honor of the Sun King, and that's what they adopted. And now their whole year rotates every month. They lose a month a year and go backwards. So their 7th month of fast rotates through the whole 12 months of our pagan solar calendar. And you'd think they would do something about that, but they haven't been able to. And Rabbinical Judaism has numerous opinions about the difficulties with their calendar and aren't able to do anything about it. They're all waiting for the Imam Mahdi or Messiah to return, or Elijah to fix it. So you can see that this is a highly contested issue. But this is very simple what's being discussed here. Since it is clear that any prediction of the date of the first visibility is uncertain, it is necessary to decide whether to prefer an early prediction that could not be substantiated by direct observation if conditions prove to be good, or by a late prediction that could be vitiated by an observer on the previous day. The simple rule that this office recommends is that the age of the moon should be 30 hours at the time of sunset at the place concerned, but this rule is not reliable in middle and high latitudes. Modern Islam makes, and post-temple Judaism make, an attempt to see the rising crescent moon as part of their worship. See the Mishnah. There's 2 or 3 pages in there about it. This is forbidden and false idolatrous activity, which will make all of their worship unacceptable. Most modern, meaning 20th century churches and assemblies of God, accommodate this activity by using the rabbinical Hillel II calendar with its holy day postponements and its search to see the first crescent moon. We must not lift our eyes to see the crescent moon as prominent in the calendar. We will not attempt to see the crescent moon in worship and then set the fasts, feasts, and attendant holy days from this activity. This is done in Islam and in some branches of Judaism, some of whom keep 2 days for the Day of Trumpets, which they declare is the beginning of the creation and the first day of the year, as they do not know which day the crescent moon will be visible. And this reasoning is why the days were stopped being kept as holy. You could now end up with 3 holy days in a row in different parts of the world because they don't know which day is which, so you better keep 2 at a minimum, or maybe 3, if that unacceptably bumps against the Sabbath. I hope you can see that. I mean, it's absolute preposterous reasoning that because you can't see a crescent, you have to keep 2 holy days. And then if it butts against the Sabbath, then you better make it 3. But we don't really know what day it is anyway, so what difference does it make? Well, we'll just postpone these holy days, and so we can enjoy our life a little better. And what's that got to do with the Day of Trumpets? It has to do with the Day of Trumpets because you should be blowing the shofar and the silver trumpets if possible. The shofar, in recognition of your Creator, using a naturally grown instrument created by the Almighty, and the silver trumpets for the human that are called to the meetings at the time. So the Day of Trumpets is a day of blowing. The word doesn't even mean trumpets, it means blow or shout. It's a day of shouting and blowing because it is an important day in the plan of God. Probably the day Messiah will return, 10 days later or 10 years later, Satan will be locked up so he can't harm humanity anymore. Then you're on into the millennial kingdom of God, represented by tabernacles, which culminates in the last great day, the new heavens and new earth, and all of the plan of God then being worked out as he originally intended, without all the death and destruction. So we blew on the first day of the 7th month. Pretty simple. Yes, there were some back-to-back Sabbaths, and that's our rejoicing. We're pleased to do it for the Almighty. So God forbids this type of activity as iniquity or a sin, and which is a breach of the covenant, denies God and his conduct, which calls for a corrective judgment and perhaps even a death sentence. So, very few people receive these type of death sentences, but they are administered. When a senior leader of a Church of God, anytime Church of God declares you don't have to keep the Sabbath and don't tithe and you don't have to do anything of that, so he dies 40 weeks to the hour later, that should have been a remarkable question for most people to think, well, maybe we shouldn't be abandoning these Sabbaths and holy days and tithing and all the terms of the covenant. I don't know how you could have missed that or not had a clear picture of what God puts up with. 40 weeks for repentance he is given. Didn't repent, he's dead, and not a very pleasant death. And we can all be in the same boat, just because we don't seem to have much authority, mostly because no one will listen to what we're representing and speaking what we understand from God's way of life and observation of the covenant. That's irrelevant. You just have to speak the truth and be a good living witness. You then become an ambassador. And hopefully we can be good witnesses over this time. But just keep this in mind. We'll cover that here in Deuteronomy 17, 1-5. You shall not sacrifice to Jehovah your God an ox or a sheep which has a blemish or any other defect, for that is a detestable thing to Jehovah. If there is found in your midst or any of your towns which Jehovah is giving you a man or woman that does evil in the sight of Jehovah by transgressing his covenant, so that covers a lot of ground, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun, or the moon. So that's it, shaving your head with a bowl over it. So you have a moon or a sun shape in your head. Then the whole middle top of your head is shaved bald. So then you have the image of the sun in your sun worship. You mostly see that in ancient paganism and modern Catholicism. You'll see the priests shave their heads that way to the sun god. That's what this is talking about. So now they are serving the God they worship. Very few other people serve the true God the way he asks them to worship. So, the sun, the moon, or any of the heavenly hosts which I have not commanded, for if it is told you, and you have heard it, then you shall inquire thoroughly, and behold, if it is true, and the certain thing is done, this detestable thing, and done in Israel, then you shall bring out that man or that woman that has done this evil deed to your gates, that is, the man or the woman, you shall stone them to death. Job 31:26, if I looked at the sun when it shone, or the moon going on in splendor, and my heart became secretly enticed, my hand threw a kiss from my mouth, that too would have been an iniquity calling for judgment, for I would have denied God above. Deuteronomy 4:14-19, Jehovah commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that you might perform them in the land where you are going over to possess it. So watch yourselves carefully, since you did not see any form on the day Jehovah spoke to you at Horeb in the midst of the fire. Lest you act corruptly and make a graven image for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or any fish that is in the water. Beware, lest you lift up your eyes to heaven and see the sun and the moon and the stars and all the host, and be drawn away to worship them and serve them, those which Jehovah your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven. So the natural astronomical cycle, and the fact that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and you happen to look there and see the sun shining and are glad it's coming up because it'll warm up a bit, or that there's a bit of light with a full moon, so you can perhaps travel at night when you didn't have time earlier in the cycle because it was too dark with the new moon. That's not talking about worshiping. Taking note of God's astronomical cycle isn't worship, but it can be made worship, to where you're putting images on your clothing, graven, carved images. People that are putting crescent moons and in their earrings. If you're going to put a crescent moon in your earring, yes, that's a graven image, and yes, it's a sin, and you ought to rethink it. If you're going to put tattoos on your body of crescents and symbols of these false gods, you can expect you may not have everything you think you deserve. There may be a problem. And you saw what happened in ancient Israel when they were taking off their army after they were slaughtered. They took off all the armor and things like that, and what did they find? Crescent moon amulets. See, all these amulets, you pray to this God, because he's obviously more powerful than this Jehovah fellow over here, and you want him to save you. So you can't claim covenant-keeping status and be doing all these types of things and praying to Jehovah, and then you've got all these emblems and witnesses before the whole world that this is who you really worship. Let's hang a golden calf in your ear or around your neck. This type of stuff. That's what this is talking about. I hope you understand that. Now, this activity of looking for a new crescent moon in its cycles brought wearing of mystical protective amulets in the form of crescent ornaments into Israel. Now, they came out of Egypt with a lot of this stuff. It was boiled down, turned into fluid, made into a golden calf by Mr. Aaron there. Got Israel in quite a bit of trouble. So it's these things are just sort of, you can read over them quickly, and they're not too many verses, and they seem like, yeah, they shouldn't have done that. But it's much more serious, because we're doing similar types of things today, just in a different historical setting, using different things. But these amulets can be just the same. Think of anything, we'd be worse. So the wearing of these insignia identify the person wearing them to the gods they represent and in whom they hope they'll protect them. That's what's going on. And all of these Kabbalistic emblems and these formulas, pagan stuff, is all emblems to a false god that is going to give them health and wealth. And you will see that in modern Trinitarian presenters and holy rollers and Bible thumpers and all that. And they are quite vehement that their God has made them healthy and wealthy, and not too wise in my opinion, but that's what they do today as much as then. Okay, Isaiah 3:8-26. Jerusalem has stumbled, Judah has fallen because of their speech, their actions against Jehovah. To rebel against his glorious presence, the expression of their faces bears witness against them. They display their sins like Sodom. They do not even conceal it. Woe to them! They have brought evil upon themselves. Say to the righteous, it will go well with them, for they will eat the fruit of their actions. Woe to the wicked, it will go badly with them, for what he deserves will be done to him. O my people, their oppressors are children, women rule over them. O my people, you who guide you astray, and confuse the direction of your paths, Jehovah arises to contend and stands to judge the people. Jehovah enters into the judgment with the elders and the princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard, the plunder of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, grinding the face of the poor, declares Jehovah of hosts, Jehovah Sabaoth. Moreover, Jehovah said, because the daughters of Zion are proud, walk with their heads held high, seductive eyes go along with mincing steps, tinkle the bangles on their feet. Therefore the Lord will afflict the scalp of the daughters of Zion with scabs, will make their foreheads bare. In that day Jehovah will take away the beauty of their anklets, headbands, crescent ornaments, dangling earrings, bracelets, veils, headdresses, ankle chains, sashes, perfume, boxes, amulets, finger rings, nose rings, festal robes, outer tunics, cloaks, money, hand mirrors, undergarments, turbans, and veils. So that covers just about everything. So these people that are presenting themselves in their finery and looking down on people that aren't as fine as them or smart as them or strong as them or have these smoothie words with this type of stuff, we'll see what happens to them. Now, it will come about that instead of sweet perfume, there will be putrefaction. Instead of a belt, a rope. Instead of well-set hair, a plucked-out scalp. Instead of fine clothes, a donning of a sackcloth. Branding instead of beauty. You'll be given a number and branded. You may be given a number and branded. And if you think you have to work for a corrupt system today, well, you'll find out what it's like to work out to a real system when God puts Assyria or whoever else over you. You know, the fact that these don't happen to us readily, you see, we have had 200 years of protection in the West, the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and the blessings of Abraham to the British Commonwealth nations, Reuben as well. We've been protected. Hardly anything has happened to us, except what we've done to ourselves, and even that hasn't gone the full course. The First World War, I think 5 times as many people died of the disease after the war, of the Spanish flu, than died in the war. So, your men will fall by the sword, your mighty ones in battle, your gates will be lament and mourn, and deserted she will sit on the ground. Judges 8:21-27, and Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise yourself, fall on us, for as the man so is his strength. So Gideon rose, killed Zebah and Zalmunna, took the crescent ornaments which were on their camels' necks. So these guys are bragging about their worship of their false god Sin. That was the name of the sin in the Middle East, right? And in southern Saudi Arabia. So this moon god, the crescent moon is his emblem, is named Sin. Men of Israel said to Gideon, Rule over us, you and your son's sons, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I won't rule over you, neither my son rule over you. Jehovah shall rule over you. If everybody followed the laws of Jehovah, it would have worked fine. We'd have had most of your resources, but instead we wanted a king like all the nations. We wanted to be like all the nations, so we got what we asked for. So I would request of you that each of you give me an earring from his spoil, for they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they said, We will surely give them. They spread out a garment. Every one of them threw an earring there from his spoil. And the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside the crescent ornaments, pendants, purple robes which were on the kings of Midian, and beside the neck bands that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made them into an ephod, placed it in the city Ophrah. I think Ophrah means dusty. And all the Israel played harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and his household. So we don't know where Moses was buried, or you would have a litany of people every year, millions, going up to his tomb to touch it, or to be in proximity to it, or that type of thing, because that's what we do. And here you take these crescent ornaments that are held in honor of other gods, and you make it into an emblem, and it becomes a snare to Gideon. Gideon should have known better, or he should have just asked Joshua, well, should I do anything with these people, or what should I do? Because we have a tendency to think we're doing something that'll make God happy by doing things he didn't ask you to do. Just do what he told you to do. But you'll find that's more than enough to do. And all these other added things come from our inability to get our old corrupted mind out of it, our old false worship and our heritage out of the system. It's just almost impossible to get that out of our head. So we're all in the same boat with this. But as you can see, the crescent ornaments copying the crescent moon as symbols of a false god are to be removed from Israel and from the churches and assemblies of the Almighty. We'll remove all these crescent images from us if we don't. This is because the rebellious speech and actions of the people who honor these images are against Jehovah. What we just saw, he's talking about this rebellious speech. These people that talk. It can even become a snare to an individual like Gideon and his household, and then from there to the entire nation. It just takes a little bit of time. And it goes from the, from the Cohens to the Levites and then to the whole nation. Pretty soon the whole nations of Israel are corrupted and destroyed. So we will not participate and not be part of any of that. And yes, it's difficult. It's true. So Judges 8:26, the weight of the gold earrings he requested was 1,700 shekels. So I should have looked up the weight of that, besides the crescent ornaments and pendants and purple robes. So you can see there, 27, he made an ephod. It's not much difference than with that and your golden calf. So he had the whole record in the history of what Aaron did and how much trouble it got everybody into. And then he does a similar type of thing. They're using the plunder from Egypt, and he's using the plunder from the Ishmaelites. So some of the stuff is difficult, no two ways about it. Now, the sunlight and moonlight, which sinful humanity love, and which we have served and gone after, and even worship, will be removed from the sight during the tribulation. You can see that in Matthew 24:29. Idolatrous humanity will receive a correction for the past 40 jubilees of sin. And you can see that in Joel 2:31, Matthew 24:29, Luke 21:25, Acts 2:20, Revelation 6:12, and verses 21 and 23, or chapter 21, verse 23. Now the unseen new moon at the conjunction sets the day apart as a Sabbath. It is to be honored and properly kept for worship. Ezekiel 46, starting in verse 1, thus says Jehovah Sabaoth, the Jehovah Elohim, the gate of the inner court of the sanctuary facing east shall be shut the 6 working days, and opened on the day of the new moon. The prince shall enter by way of the porch of the gate from the outside and stand by the post of the gate. Then the priest shall provide his burnt offering, his holocaust, and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate and then go out, but the gate shall not be shut until evening. The people of the land shall worship at the doorway of the gate before Jehovah on the Sabbaths and on the new moon. So you are to be worshiping before your Creator on the new moon. And don't let anybody talk you out of that or listen to any of their gibberish. It's a bit more difficult to work out the days, that type of thing, but don't let anybody tell you it's not. As I was told, yes, anciently it was holy. In the future it will be holy. You can see that in Isaiah and elsewhere. But it's just right now, this 40, this 2,000 years, it's a bit problematic. So we won't bother. Well, even if it is problematic, it's not that bad. It's not that bad today here, rejoicing before your God Almighty, or before the first day of the month, or a week from Friday on the next conjunction, when you have back-to-back Sabbaths. That won't be that terrible. You just won't be able to conduct any business or make any money. Well, your wealth is in the hand of your Creator, what He does or doesn't give you. He gives us the ability to make wealth, and He'll provide it. In a lot of our cases, though, if we got too much too quickly, we'd destroy ourselves. Which happens repeatedly with people that win these lots and different things like that. They have difficulty and end up in worse shape. They just enjoy your life and enjoy what you have, and they try to improve it. But I hope you can see, I don't know what could be anything confusing about that. All the people of the land shall also worship before Jehovah on the new moons. Worship, serve, not acknowledge. And, Colossians 2:16 and 17 is a highly contested new verse. Therefore, let no one act as your judge in regard to food or drink or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day. Now, the churches of the last 300 and 400 years have used this as a reason for keeping the festivals. Many churches have kept the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath. They have kept it and done a very good job. Fewer have kept the festivals, because now it's a bit more difficult to keep it 3 times a year, keep these festivals certain days holy, set apart for a specific purpose with no business being conducted on it. Now you add the new moon to it. Of course, now you just added an extra 12 holy days to the year. Now it becomes a bit more difficult. So they would use, most of these churches would use Colossians 2:16 to say you have to keep the feast. How they can read over new moons and jump to feasts, I don't know. But anyway, that's just the history of this. I don't know what could be any clearer. You will keep the seventh-day Sabbaths. You will keep the new moons, and you will keep the festivals. So that's 8 days of the spring feast, 8 days of the ingathering of the fall feast, and 2 days of Pentecost. The translation above is rendered so as to make one think that Christians are not required to keep the Sabbaths, new moons, or high days. Like no one act as your judge, so because you're not keeping it, you don't need to be judged, do you? I didn't know what I was talking about. I hope everybody can see that. I mean, it's pathetic, some of this what is presented to us to confound us. I mean, yeah, let no one act as your judge. Not don't be judged because you don't need to worry about being judged because you're not doing it. No, don't let any pagans judge you because you're keeping the new moon as a Sabbath. Make your quotes, give them the scriptures. Most of the time when Messiah was contesting with those that are trying to present them with the oral law, he just quoted scripture. Only occasionally with the executives did he unload on them and call them a bunch of stinking lying hypocrites. Boy, being around for some of his, imagine being on the wall with some of these conversations he unloaded on these executives, right? He didn't talk like that to your average people who were, maybe didn't understand things correctly. He unloaded on the know-it-alls who were trying to confound people. And maybe the Almighty had given them confusion of mind. So his words are pretty strong when you read some of that stuff directed to the Cohens. Okay, it confirms what the first century converted Gentiles in modern Turkey kept them all with Gnostic opposition. So this is hidden secret knowledge and hidden calendar issues and hidden gnosis that we'll just have to give you because it's too confusing. What did God say? What did Messiah say? I did nothing in a corner. I never hid anything I said. I always spoke in public. No one of them could have confused anything, which is what he's contesting with them when they're accusing him. Well, didn't you do this and didn't you say that? No. I never did anything hidden. And here you see there's no secret knowledge that we have to wait for to be given. God has given us everything we need to know. And it's true, the translations present us with a problem. Very difficult. And when Rabbinical Judaism has changed some of the scriptures and they've gotten through superstition, the name Jehovah removed and Lord put in its place Adonai, well, yes, that is problematic. But the translators of the 1400s should have known better. All the paperwork was out on the Gemara and the Talmud and what they were trying to do to us. But anyway, that's what we have to research and study a little bit. So paraphrase on Colossians 2:16, don't let any man judge you for eating or drinking. So see the fact that you won't eat food cooked in pork lard and you won't do certain things. A lot of the Gnostics don't drink. The Mithraic mysteries were centered on a total submersion baptism, washing your feet, and holy water. Had to use holy water because they didn't drink. Drinking causes an effect with your God. See, so these first century Gentile Christians were allowed to drink. So that's what they'd be getting judged on, drinking. Alcohol. Horrible. No, you're judged on getting drunk. Having a glass of wine is good for your health, or can be. So don't let any man judge you for eating and drinking, because we're refusing to eat unsuitable foods. So they would be judging us for being these horrible people. If they put a plate of prawns in front of you and you said, no thanks, I can't. Well, usually they just stomp off instead of asking if they're going to invite you over for dinner. sometimes, I would just maybe mention to people, I can't eat this, that, and the other, and don't, if you're going to put it in front of me, I'm going to just push it away, or I won't come. Are you inviting over for company to have a nice evening meal or something, or are you going to shove it in my face to prove, right, something? And then it becomes objectionable, right? So this is judgment. You're being judged for what you won't eat or what you will drink. This is all Gnostic paganism. Or for any portion of your observances of a festival, that's the 3 feasts, a new moon at the conjunction, or a 7th-day Sabbath, which are merely a shadow of future events. So this was nothing. It just was, here's what God's going to do in the future. You don't have to do it now. But you do have to keep Christmas, Easter, the New Year's, and every other pagan festival. If you're not keeping them, trouble. So it's who's God's festivals and foods you're going to eat and drink or watch, and not these. Hopefully everybody should be able to read this stuff and just see through that and laugh at anybody who brings it up in your face. A shadow of future events in God's master plan, of which Jesus Christ is the central figure, but let the body of Christ, which casts the shadow or foreshadows as he, walking in the light, moves towards you in their antitypical fulfillment, to be your judge in this matter. So you got judgment given to Christ so he can make a judgment on us. The Almighty, let him make the judgment on you, not these pagan Gnostics. Now, I don't know where I got that paraphrase. That wasn't mine, anyway, I'll quote, and hopefully I can find out where I got that from. Now, you can see determining when the next conjunction is not difficult, because it says, oh, well, that's too confusing because we aren't all astronomers. Well, you don't need to be. You just need to be able to divide and multiply small numbers, 2 principally. David knew, and the lunar cycles were published in any event. Now, they're published by the Samaritans and published twice a year, and you had to have them or you were evicted from the community of the Samaritans. Philo of Alexandria, Special Laws 2, chapter, 26, chapter 140, states that they were published. This was made to be a mystery or made to be unknown by the assaults and the book burning and all this other types of stuff that was going on then, just as it is today. They published them. Samuel 25, so David said to Jonathan, tomorrow is the new moon. I ought to sit down to eat with the king, but let me go that I may hide myself in the field until the evening. See, so eating jointly is an act of worship on a holy day, eating together. 1 Samuel 20, verse 18, Jonathan said, tomorrow is a new moon. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. When you have stayed 3 days, you shall go down quickly, come to the place where you hide yourself on that eventful day. You shall remain by the stone Ezel, and I will shoot 3 arrows onto the side as I shoot at a target. Behold, I will send the lad, saying, go find the arrows. If I specifically say to the lad, behold, the arrows are come on this side of you, get them, then come. For there is safety for you and no harm, as Jehovah lives. But as I say to the youth, behold, the arrows are beyond you, go, for Jehovah has sent you away. As for the agreement which you and I have spoken, behold, Jehovah is between you and me forever. So David hid in the field. When the new moon came, the king sat down to eat, and the king was at his seat as usual, and the seat was by the wall. Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. The new moon was then, as the day is, a required sabbatical assembly, which was foreknown. They knew when it was. They knew when it was coming. He knew he was supposed to be at the king's table eating on the day of the conjunction. They couldn't be planning something like that for a crescent because they don't know when it is. And then they only apply the day after they know, with their approved witnesses. Okay, here's a little bit of Talmudic information of what has been done anciently from paganism and is being done today. Pray to the moon. Who the heck would pray to or for the moon? Nobody, right? Millions and millions and millions. For 1,000 odd years, the Jews have had special prayers, benedictions, directed to the moon. They wish for the moon to return to its full light-reflecting status. And they make prayers to ask it to reshine itself. This is not a joke. First, the prayer is directed to the first crescent, then to the time of its fullness. The ritual is known as Kiddush Levana. literally the sanctification of the new moon. It is a short service recited sometime between the 3rd and 14th day of the lunar cycle. It is the full moon being sanctified, and its ceremonies all have a Kabbalistic or mystical undercurrent. It's the full moon that they're going before their goddesses and gods too. And that's why they want the full moon to give them the power and their health and their wealth. God is declared to have a personally atone for the loss of the moon's light. Did you know that? That the great Almighty has to atone for his design, his astronomical design of having this moon lose its light. And of course, you'll have to say some benedictions, some good words to make sure that the light returns. I mean, this should be hilarious if it wasn't so serious, because people actually are doing this. And at the start of the year, too. And the whole start of the year can be delayed by a month because certain benedictions to these cycles can't be given by the rabbis. Full moon ceremonies are used as part of most pagan shamanistic religions, are prevalent with the modern Western Wiccans and witchcraft. Below in appendices 1 and 2 are quotes from Jewish sources commenting on the nature of the prayers to and the dance for the moon and its light. So dancing to the moon, we've heard in a recent song, is actually taking place. The Almighty is accused for causing the loss of light. This shows the idolatrous aspects relating to the sun and moon gods. He is even accused of a faulty creation which he must atone for. Well, we all know that. Appendix 1. When we Rosh Chodesh, sanctifying the coming Hebrew month, it is customary to announce the Moled. Now, in the sanctification of the new moon, written by Maimonides, the Rambam, he equates the Moled with the new moon, with the conjunction, not with the crescent, to inform the congregation of the exact moment when the moon will appear for the first time in the new month. Sometime before mid-month, when the moon can be clearly seen, a quaint but beautiful ritual known as Kiddush Levana is observed, in which we offer thanks to God for having created the moon to shed its light and loveliness during the night. This morning I would like to discuss with you the brief prayer which I repeated during that observance. May it be the will of my Lord and God of my fathers to fulfill the deficiency of the moon so that it may no longer be reduced in size. May the light of the moon again be like the light of the sun as it was during the first 7 days of creation before its size was reduced. The Siddur, the common Jewish prayer book. So, God, if you please just get it back to the way it was initially and forget this reducing of the light of the moon. Jews have always been beset with serious problems, anxieties, hounded and persecuted. Even to this day, there are so many issues and troubles that demand our serious attention. There is first and foremost the problem in the survival of the state of Israel, followed by the question of how to bring about a semblance of order in the chaotic condition of the religious life of American Jewry. Then there is the tragedy of the growing rate of intermarriage, the curse of disunity in our ranks, the lack of reliable and sound leadership. All we can think to pray for at the time of Kiddush Levana is for an improvement in the luminosity and condition of the moon. My explanation is that the Jew has always had a close affinity and a sense of identification with the moon. The sages, that is the Talmudic writers, viewed the destiny of Israel and the moon and saw a significant relationship between them. When a Jew prayed for improvement in the condition of the moon, he also had in mind the good welfare of his people. Appendix 2. What's a marvelous night for a moon dance? When I was a teenager, we called it the moon dance. Later, when we began to grasp how outlandish a performance it was, we began to call it howling at the moon. We were Jews pretending to be werewolves on the first Saturday night of every month. So here now you're getting a bit of an indicator of how the months start on the Sabbath, right? So the months just change automatically in conformity with a 28-day week instead of a 29.5-day week starting on the Sabbath. That's where all the stuff's coming from. Okay, howling at the moon. We were pretending to be werewolves on the first Saturday night of every month. Conglomeration of psalms, handshakes, blessings, dancing. Took less than 7 or 8 minutes, but it sticks in my mind today as a spiritual highlight of my youth. What on earth was I doing? Kiddush Levana, literally the sanctification of the new moon, is a short service recited somewhere between the 3rd and 14th day of the lunar cycle. It is commonly said at the conclusion of the first Sabbath, which falls out during this period. The Havatgala folk leave shul with siddur in hand and look up at the sky. The moon is visible. The crowd begins chanting at the service, if the moon is visible. Then, after saying Shabbat Alechem to one another, the stalwarts would finish off the ritual with a shuffling circle dance. Verses from Sabbath morning service describing the creation of the celestial lights, the sun and the moon, were sung to a special tune. We used to dance right outside the front door. In the full view of any passers-by, it was a unique pleasure to carry the strange and beloved ceremony into a public place. I loved the din of shaloms and alechem, the smiles and handshakes, and the movement between greeting and responding to the greeting of others. I also loved the dance under the moon and hoped that our non-Jewish neighbors took us for the Indians that we were. Why is moon dancing part of a Jewish prayer? Certainly we were not praying to the moon. So, what role does moon play in Jewish theology? The book of Genesis describes how God created the sun and moon on the 4th day as follows. 2 great lights, great light to rule the day, small light to rule over the night. Here's the Midrash. So here is the Talmudic dissertation on this scripture. God made 2 great lights, but later it says the great light and the smaller light. The moon said it was before the Holy One, the master of the world. Is it possible for 2 kings to share or to use one crown? God said to her, go and diminish yourself. She said before God, because I asked a good question, should I diminish myself? This is the moon talking to the Almighty here, right? So I guess you picked that up. God said, go rule both in day and night. She said, what advantage of that? A candle in the daylight is useless. God said, then go and let Israel count their days and years by you. She said, well, they use daylight of the sun to count the seasonal cycles as well. Seeing that she was not appeased, the Holy One said, bring a sacrificial atonement for me that I may diminish the moon. That is what our Simon ben Lachish said, what is different about the ram of the new moon that is offered for God? 1 ram of the flock for a sin offering for God, Numbers 28:14, said the Holy One. This ram shall be an atonement for me that I diminish the moon. You can see the Babylonian Talmud, Holland 60b. That's where you'll find that. Now, most of the time you see this is never broadcast or presented. You would never know where some of this bizarre thinking comes from. It must just be a joke because no one would actually say it. Yeah, they actually say it and they actually do it. Then they accuse God. And then you see, of course, these 2 others can bicker with God and then he'll have to say, yeah, I guess I was wrong. You guys have defeated me in my, in this debate. So the Almighty has to make atonement for diminishing the moon. Good. The moon's diminishment is understood by the sages as a sin committed against the moon, but for which God must atone. So it's not just somebody else's opinion. That's what they believe. You just don't generally present it publicly. The standard symbolic association of the sun with masculinity, the moon with femininity, makes the story rich with possibilities. The Midrash appears then as an invitation by the rabbis to imagine a world of restored harmony and equality between men and women. Kiddush Levana is a mystical liturgy introduced into Jewish custom by Yitzhak Luria in the 16th century. Now, if you read any of the writings of Yitzhak Luria, you'll be fascinated by them. He's basically responsible for all the modern Kabbalistic presentations for the ignorant Gentiles and Goyim, because he took these hypotheses and wrote them in a way that the Gentiles would accept, could understand and would accept. So that's who this fellow is. He's a big deal. If God brings an atonement for the diminishing of the moon, then there must be some desire on high to truly repent for the reliance done to her. The last and most powerful statement in Kiddush Levana is a prayer which wishes for a restored moon. They were taught in the school of Rabbi Yishmael. Were Israel able to greet their Father in heaven only once a month, it would be enough. Abaye says, for this reason it should be said standing. Who is she coming from the desert, leaning on her lover? May it be your will, Jehovah, my Elohim, and the Elohim of my fathers to fill in the darkness of the moon, so that she will not be diminished at all. No conjunction. Let the light of the moon, as well as the light of the sun, and the light of 7 days of creation, just as she was before it was diminished, as it was said, the two great lights, we may be a fulfillment of the verse, they shall seek out the Lord their God and David their king. Hosea 3:5. Amen. So this is a real prayer that is actually presented and looking up to the moon and demanding that God atone for the sin of causing it to diminish. This is real, people. Jewish feminists have used this imagery to restore and build upon women's traditions and rituals associated with the new moon. The wisdom is simple. The world was not perfect when it was created, and it is not perfect yet. Well, God said it was perfect. It's the people that are the problem, not the planet Earth. Or the astronomical cycles that are put in place are all good. Very good. See, it's twisted, right? The problem is with God's creation, not with them. They're the problem. We're all the problem, not the creation. Okay. It is a very Jewish sensibility to give testimony that the Messiah has not come. We are not there yet. The disharmonies of the creation are a work plan, a set of duties, the last act of which will include God's joyous restoration of the moon. For this reason, we dance underneath its light, reminding ourselves that the work of its restoration is yet to come. So you can see that reference there. I don't know if this type of thing is still up on the internet. Probably is, because they're publicizing more and more and more on what they've done to us, as they stated they do in the Rosicrucian manuals, 500 years ago. That near the end days, they would tell us what they've been doing to us. So the equinox is observable by points on the horizon when the sun rises and sets. On the day of the equinox, the sun is directly over the equator, rising due east, setting due west, regardless of your latitude on the earth. So the equinox can be recognized simply by knowing which way is east and west. This movement is also observable using a stick in your yard. Shove it into the ground in an upright position. Mark the shadows at sunrise or early morning and the sunset or late afternoon. From the solstice to equinox, they will form a slight angle to each other. On the days of the equinox, it will align into a perfectly straight line. So if you can force a pencil into a piece of cardboard, drive a nail into a board, set a steel rod in a slab of concrete, you can make your own sundial and recognize the equinoxes and the solstices. How important is it? See, it's not much more complicated than counting to 2 or dividing by 2 to find out when the conjunction is. It's presented to be that we're unable to know these things, and it's not true. So how important is it for everyone to observe the correct day? On the original Passover in Egypt, it was a matter of life or death for all the firstborn. Exodus 12:21-24. So if anybody wasn't inside their house, with the blood on the lintels of their house in their land of slavery, or their dwelling, they died. Firstborn was dead. Later, anyone who failed to observe atonement on the correct day would be cut off or emasculated and destroyed. So the promise of death for disobedience is a statute forever throughout all your dwellings, verse 31 there. Conclusion. The non-idolatrous churches of God say to the above declarations made against our God and Father, Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light, light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. So we'll close with that and have a good lunch and meet together a bit later. So thank you very much for your ears, and we can discuss this as if you wish. Thank you.